2 cups of vinegar. That's all it takes. 0 weeds. Not for a week, not for a season, for good. You've got a jug of it sitting in your kitchen right now. Same bottle you put on your French fries, same bottle your mother kept by the stove. And it will do what that $40 spray bottle from the garden center could never do, no matter how many times you bought it. I know how that sounds. Stay with me. Because my people have done this for generations. Long before any of those bottles had a barcode on them, long before there was a store to sell them in, you walk out your back door in the morning, coffee in your hand, and there they are again. The dandelions in the cracks of your walk, the crabgrass crawling under your fence, the thistle that pricked your thumb last week, standing right back up like it's laughing at you. You pulled it, you sprayed it, you spent good money on it, and it came back anyway. Here's the part that should make you set that coffee down. The folks who sell you that spray have no reason to tell you what we already knew. None at all. A jug of vinegar costs them nothing to admit. But a man who knows it doesn't walk back into their store. I was raised plain in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. We didn't have the conveniences the English lean on. No weed killer trucked in by the gallon. No man in a uniform spraying our fence line. We had the garden, our 2 hands, and the things the good Lord already put in the cupboard. And that garden fed 11 of us. Before I show you the rest, do me one small favor. Drop your state in the comments. Just your state. Pennsylvania, Texas, Ohio, wherever you're sitting. I want to see where this old way is traveling, and it helps me know which weeds you're fighting where you are. Now, stay with me, because around the middle of this, I'm going to show you exactly how to clear a weed you thought you'd never beat, a thick, rooted, years-old weed, for less than the price of a cup of coffee. The same way my grandfather did it on his hands and knees in the heat of July without a single bottle from any store. But first, you need to understand why the cheap thing in your kitchen works when the expensive thing in your shed doesn't. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And you'll be a little angry at how long it was kept quiet. Let me tell you what a weed actually is, the way my father explained it to me when I was a boy, kneeling beside him in the dirt. A weed is mostly water. You wouldn't think it, looking at how tough they are. But a dandelion, a plantain, a sheet of crabgrass, they're built like a wet sponge wrapped in a thin green skin. Every leaf is a little bag of water, held up stiff and proud by the pressure inside it. That pressure is what keeps the plant standing. Take the water out, and the whole thing collapses. Folds up like a tent with the poles pulled. Now, here's where the vinegar comes in. The vinegar you have in your kitchen is mostly water too, but it carries something called acetic acid. That's the sharp part. The part you smell, the part that puckers your mouth on a pickle. And acetic acid does one simple, brutal thing to a leaf. It rips open that thin green skin. It breaks down the waxy coat the plant uses to hold its water in. So the moment the acid touches the leaf in the sun, the water starts pouring out faster than the plant can ever replace it. The leaf dries, it browns, it curls, and it does it in hours, not days. And it does it in hours, not days. If you want to go even deeper into these old-fashioned methods, the kind that were never put on any store shelf, I've put together something I think you'll find worth your time. It's called the Garden Blueprint, and it covers old-fashioned pest and weed cures that cost pennies, drawn straight from the plain traditions I was raised in. There's also the Harvest Blueprint, which goes into Amish soil and storage secrets for bigger yields, the kind of knowledge that got buried right alongside the vinegar trick. Both are part of the Complete Garden Field Edition, available now for $97 at the link in the description. If what I'm telling you today is landing, that's where the rest of it lives. Now, back to what I was telling you about your wallet, because the numbers here should make you sit up straight. My grandmother used to say, a thing dies the way it lives. A weed lives by holding water. So you kill it by taking the water away. Plain as that. The folks at Oregon State University put real numbers to this not long ago. They tested ordinary vinegar on young weeds, and on the small ones, the tender ones, they were seeing kills upward of 80 to 100%. The household kind, the 5% you buy for pennies, knocked down the little weeds clean. Stronger vinegar took down bigger ones. That's not folklore. That's a land-grant university with white coats and clipboards walking out to a test plot and writing down what my people have known since before that university had a single brick laid. Now think about what that means for your wallet. A gallon of plain white vinegar runs you, what, $3, maybe $4? That gallon will treat more cracks and fence lines than you've got in your whole yard. Meanwhile, the bottle they sell you at the big box store, the one with the trigger handle and the bright label, can run you $15, $20, even $30, and it empties in one afternoon. Do that math across a summer. Across 10 summers, you've handed them hundreds of dollars for something that was sitting next to your salad oil the entire time. That's the first thing they'd rather you not sit and think about. But it gets worse, and it gets more interesting, so don't go anywhere. Because now you're going to say to me, all right, but how do I actually use it? And this is where most folks ruin a good thing and then blame the vinegar. Here is the timing, and the timing is everything. You spray on a hot, dry, sunny day. The hotter, the better. Full sun, no clouds rolling in, no rain in the forecast for at least a day or two. My grandfather called it the burning hours. Late morning into the early afternoon when the sun is high and the leaves are dry, the acid opens the leaf, and then the sun does the rest of the work for free. The two of them together are far stronger than either one alone. Spray on a cool, gray day, and you've half wasted it. Spray right before a rain, and you fully wasted it because the rain washes it off before it can work. So you wait for the right day. We always did. A plain life teaches you to watch the sky, not the calendar. Now, how much? You don't drown the plant. You don't need a flood. You need to wet the leaves so they glisten, top and bottom if you can reach. A small pump sprayer is perfect, the kind you already own for other jobs. A spray bottle works for the cracks in your walk. You're coating the green, not soaking the ground. And here's a trick my mother swore by, passed down from her mother. You add a small squirt of plain dish soap to the vinegar, just a teaspoon to a quart. The soap breaks the surface tension. In plain words, it makes the vinegar stick to the leaf instead of beating up and rolling off like water off a duck. That little bit of soap can be the difference between a weed that browns and a weed that shrugs you off. Some folks add a handful of salt too. I'll tell you about salt in a moment because there's a right place for it and a very wrong place for it. And getting that wrong can cost you your whole garden bed. So hold that thought. Spray once, then walk away, come back the next morning and look. On the little weeds, the seedlings, the tender spring growth, you'll see them already curled and brown, looking like someone took a torch to them. That fast. On the bigger ones, the established ones, you may need to come back in a few days and hit them again. And that's the honest truth, that the bottle on the store shelf will never print on its label. Nothing kills a deep old taproot in one pass. Not their product either. They just don't tell you that part. So let me tell you what's really going on under the ground, because this is the question that separates the folks who win this fight from the folks who fight it forever. When you spray a young weed, you kill the whole thing, roots and all, because the root is still small and the plant hasn't stored up much yet. Clean kill, gone. But when you spray an old, established weed, a thick dandelion that's been there 3 years, that vinegar burns the top off beautifully. The green dies. You feel like a champion. And then 2 weeks later, a little green nub pushes up from the same spot and you think the vinegar failed. It didn't fail. You just met the taproot. A dandelion taproot can go down 10 inches. Some go deeper. That root is a pantry. It's full of stored energy, the plant packed away like we'd pack a cellar for winter. Burn off the top, and the root says, no matter, I've got food saved, and it pushes up a new top from its savings. So here is how you actually win, and this is the part I promised you in the beginning, the part my grandfather did on his knees in the July heat without a single thing from a store. You don't try to beat the root with brute force. You starve it. Every time that root pushes up a new green top, it spends some of its savings to do it. It empties a little of the pantry. So the moment you see that fresh green nub, you hit it again. And again, when it comes back smaller, each time the plant spends from the cellar and the leaves die before they can pay it back. A leaf is how the plant earns. Kill the leaf and the root can't refill. You're not fighting the plant. You're bankrupting it. 3 rounds. Maybe 4 on a real stubborn one. and that pantry runs empty. The root has nothing left to push up with, and it dies all the way down for good. That's the difference between killing a weed and erasing a weed. The store wants you killing the same weed 12 times a summer, buying a new bottle each time. We were taught to erase it 3 times and never see it again. Now, my grandfather had one more move for the very worst ones, the thistle, the dock. The old woody monsters with a root like a parsnip. He'd take an old knife, cut the crown of the plant right at the soil line, and pour a little vinegar straight down into the cut, into the open wound of the root itself, not on the leaves, into the plant's own throat. The acid goes right where the leaves can't protect it. That's a thing I have never once seen printed on any product in any store. But it's older than any of those stores. So that's your toughest weed handled for pennies this weekend. But I told you I'd come back to salt. And I keep my word, because this is where good people make an expensive mistake. Salt works. Salt absolutely kills weeds. It pulls the water right out of the plant, the same way salt cures a ham, and it poisons the ground so nothing grows back. But that's exactly the problem. Salt doesn't break down. It doesn't wash away kindly. It stays in your soil and keeps it dead, sometimes for years. So salt has one good place and one place only: the cracks in your driveway, the seams in your patio, the gravel of a path where you never, ever want a single green thing to grow again. There, salt is a gift. But never put salt near a garden bed, near a tree, near anything you love or anything you might plant next spring. My uncle salted a fence line once to be done with the weeds for good. He was also done with growing anything along that fence for 3 full years. The good Lord gives us soil to steward, not to burn. And salt in the wrong place is burning it. So here's your simple rule: vinegar and a little soap for the beds, the borders, the edges, anywhere life still needs to grow. Vinegar with salt added only for the dead zones, the pavement, the gravel, where you want nothing forever. Get that one rule right, and you'll never harm a thing you meant to keep. Now, I can already hear some of you, you're thinking, this is fine for somebody starting fresh with a clean yard, but I've got an established garden, 40 years in this house, beds my wife planted, roses my mother gave me, borders I'm not about to tear up. Is this just for the young folks with a blank slate? No, this is especially for you. Let me show you why. And let me give you something you can do this very weekend on the garden you already have. When you've got an established bed, the trouble isn't the open ground. It's the weeds that come up right against the plants you love. The bindweed twisting up your rows, the grass crowding into your hostas, the chickweed hiding under the tomatoes. You can't spray freely there because vinegar doesn't know the difference between a weed and your wife's prized flower. It'll brown them both. So here's the old way to be precise. Take a cheap foam paintbrush, the kind that costs $0.25, pour your vinegar into a small cup, and instead of spraying, you paint. You paint the vinegar right onto the weeds leaves, one at a time, like you're buttering bread. The plant you want to keep an inch away never feels a drop. My grandmother did this around her flowers with a rag wrapped on a stick. Patient. Precise. Plain. It costs you nothing but a little time on a quiet evening. There's a second trick for the established garden, and this one stops weeds before they ever start. After you've cleared a bed, you smother the bare soil so new weed seeds can't catch hold. Cardboard, plain brown cardboard, the boxes piling up in your garage. Lay it flat over the bare ground around your plants, wet it down, and cover it with a few inches of mulch or grass clippings or old straw. The cardboard blocks the light. No light, no weed. It smothers the seeds in the dark, and within a season it rots down and feeds your soil instead of poisoning it. We've laid down feed sacks and old paper this way for as long as I can remember. The English call it sheet mulching now, like it's a new invention with a fancy name. It isn't. It's just covering the ground so the weeds can't see the sun, the way a careful person always has. Do those two things, the painting and the smothering, on the garden you already have, and you'll cut your weeding in half before the month is out. No tearing anything up, no starting over, working with what's already there, which is exactly how a plain man learns to do everything. So why, if If a gallon of vinegar and a piece of cardboard can do all this, were you never told, why did you spend all those summers and all those dollars on the bright bottle? Sit with that for a second, because the answer isn't pretty. There's no money in vinegar. Nobody can corner it. Nobody can put their name on it and charge you $30 and have you come back next month for more. It's been in every kitchen in America for 200 years. It's too cheap, too common, too plain. You can't build a business on something a man already owns. But a weed that comes back, now that you can build a business on a product that kills the top and leaves the root, so the weed returns in 3 weeks and you reach for the bottle again, that's not a flaw in the product. For them, that's the whole design. The returning weed is the repeat customer. Your frustration is their subscription. I'm not saying it unkindly, I'm saying it plainly. An entire industry was built on keeping you reaching for the shelf instead of the cupboard, on selling you the solution to a problem the solution keeps alive. My people were never part of that. Not because we were clever, but because we never had the store in the first place. We had to make the cheap thing work. And in making it work, we kept knowledge the outside world was happy to let you forget. There's an old USDA Farmer's Bulletin going back more than 100 years before the bright bottles existed at all that lists common vinegar and salt brine among the ways a farmer cleared unwanted growth from his paths and fence lines. It was ordinary knowledge, printed by the government, handed to any farmer who asked. And then the products came, and the advertising came, and that plain knowledge got quietly pushed to the back of the shelf behind the things that cost money. It was never disproven. It was just buried, because buried, it sells bottles. Now let me give you the thing I've been saving, the piece that ties it all together. The part the research turned up that even most of the old-timers half forgot. It's not just that vinegar kills the weed, it's about when in the weed's life you strike, and almost nobody gets this right. A weed has one moment when it is at its very weakest, not when it's small, not when it's old. It's the moment right after it sprouts and right before it flowers. In that window, the plant has spent nearly everything it had stored in the seed to throw up those first leaves, and it hasn't yet refilled the pantry or set its deep root. It is, in that moment, broke, empty, living hand to mouth on whatever its leaves can earn that very day. The growers call it the seedling to rosette stage. My grandfather just called it catching them young and hungry. If you spray your vinegar in that window, even the household 5%, you don't just burn the top, you kill a plant that has no savings to come back on. One pass, done, no 3 rounds needed, because there's no full pantry under the ground to fight you. So here is the whole secret, the thing that turns vinegar from a temporary fix into a weed that never returns. You walk your ground once a week, just once. A slow walk with your cup or your sprayer, the way we'd walk the rows at evening when the heat broke, and you hit every weed while it's still young and hungry, before it ever flowers, before it ever sets seed. A weed that never flowers never makes seeds, and seeds are the whole war. One dandelion gone to seed throws off as many as 200 seeds on the wind. Let it flower, and you haven't got one weed next year, you've got 200. But catch it young every week for a few weeks running, and something happens that feels almost like a miracle, but is really just plain arithmetic. The seeds already in your soil sprout, you kill them young, and no new seeds ever get made to replace them. The bank empties, and nothing refills it. By the second season, you walk out with your coffee, and there's almost nothing to spray. By the third, the ground is quiet. That's how you get to 0 weeds. Not one violent battle with a strong chemical. A patient, weekly, dollar-cheap walk that breaks the cycle of seeds. The store can't sell you that because there's nothing to put in a bottle. It's not a product. It's a rhythm. And a rhythm is something my people have always understood better than the world that's always in a hurry. The hurry is the trap, you see. The bright bottle promises you done in one afternoon. This weekend, no more weeds, and it's a promise it cannot keep because nature doesn't work in one afternoon. It works in seasons. The folks who sell you fast are selling you a lie that brings you back to the register. The folks who taught me to work with the season gave me a garden that got easier every year instead of harder. Let me put the whole thing together for you now, simple, so you can walk outside and start. Get a gallon of plain white vinegar. The cheap 5% is fine for young weeds and most everything in a garden bed. If you want more muscle for the old woody ones, the stronger vinegar, the kind sold for cleaning, hits harder. Just handle it with more care because it's sharp on the skin and the eyes. Treat it with respect, the way you'd treat any strong thing. Add a teaspoon of dish soap to every quart so it sticks. Pour it in a pump sprayer for open areas, a spray bottle for cracks, or a cup with a foam brush for painting around the plants you love. Wait for a hot, dry, sunny day with no rain coming. Spray or paint in the burning hours, late morning to early afternoon, wetting the leaves till they shine. Walk away, look the next morning. For the young weeds, you're done. For the old ones with the deep root, come back every time you see a new green nub and hit it again 3 or 4 rounds until the pantry's empty and it gives up for good. For the worst woody monsters, cut the crown and pour a little straight down into the wound. Salt only on the pavement and the gravel where you want nothing ever again. Never in the beds, never near a tree. Never anywhere you mean to grow. Then start your weekly walk. Catch them young, before they flower, every week. Lay cardboard and mulch on the bare ground to smother the seeds in the dark. And watch what happens over 2 seasons. Watch the ground go quiet. Watch your weekend come back to you. That's it. That's the whole of it. A gallon jug, a squirt of soap, a piece of cardboard, and the patience to walk your own ground once a week. For the price of one of those bright bottles, you've got a year of it and a method that gets stronger every season instead of weaker. I want you to think about what that really means beyond the weeds. For years, somebody convinced you that the answer to your problem lived on their shelf, behind their price tag, in their bottle, that you couldn't do it yourself, that the cheap thing in your cupboard was just for cooking and the real solution cost real money, and every spring you believed it again, and every spring you paid again, and the weeds came back again right on schedule like they were supposed to. You weren't foolish for that. You were told a story by people who profit from the telling. Nearly everyone was. But you just took something back, a piece of knowledge that was never theirs to sell, that my grandfather carried in his hands and my grandmother carried in hers, that got buried under bright labels and clever advertising, but never, ever stopped being true. The vinegar always worked. The cardboard always worked. The weekly walk always worked. They just made sure you were looking at the shelf instead of the cupboard. You're the kind of person who'd rather know how a thing works than keep paying somebody to keep it a mystery. I can tell because you're still here with me all the way to the end. That's the plain way of thinking, whether you were raised plain or not. It's the refusal to keep overpaying for what the good Lord and the old ways already provide free for anyone willing to learn it. So do this for me. Go back up to the beginning and remember what I asked. Drop your state in the comments. Just your state, where you're standing, where you'll be doing this. I read them, and it tells me which weeds folks are fighting in which corner of the country. And it helps the next person who finds this. Don't just think it, type it. This audience is quiet, and I'm asking you plainly to speak up because it matters more than you know. And tell me one more thing while you're there. Tell me the one weed that's beaten you, the one that keeps coming back no matter what. Crabgrass, bindweed, thistle, that creeping Charlie that swallows a lawn, name it. Because I'm putting together what I know about each of the worst ones, the way my elders handled them, and I want to start with the one that's troubling the most of you. If this reached you, if it gave you back something you'd been paying for without need, then walk with us, not to support a channel, to join a table of folks who are quietly recovering the plain, practical knowledge the hurried world threw away. Every week we dig up another piece of it. The old ways the outside world is only now catching up to, and we hand it back to each other the way a good neighbor always has. Next time, I'm going to show you the one kitchen scrap my grandmother buried at the foot of every tomato plant. The thing she swore made them grow heavier than any of the neighbors, and which the garden centers now sell back to you in a bag for $15 under a fancy name. It was free. It was in her scrap pail, and I'll show you exactly how she did it. Until then, get your gallon of vinegar, wait for a hot, dry day, and go take back your ground. The plain way, the way it was always meant to be done. I'll leave you with one last thing my father used to say. Kneeling there in the dirt beside me, the sun on the back of his neck, the smell of the vinegar sharp in the air, he'd say, "A man who knows how a thing works is never anybody's customer. He's just a man with a job to do and the means to do it. I didn't understand it as a boy. I understand it now. And now, so do you. There's something else worth sitting with before you go, because it's the thing that finally made all of this click for me when I was young and impatient and wanted the weeds gone yesterday. I used to fight the garden. I'd go out angry at the weeds, yanking them, spraying them, cursing them under my breath the way a boy does when he'd rather be fishing, and my grandfather watched me do this for a whole summer. He never said much. He just let me wear myself out. Then one evening, when the heat had finally broken and the light was going gold across the field, he handed me a cup of vinegar and an old brush, and he walked the rows with me, slow. He'd stop at a little weed no bigger than my thumb and paint one leaf, then move on. He wasn't fighting anything. He was just tending, keeping, watching. And he said, "You've been trying to win a war. There is no war. There's just the walk. You walk, you keep the seeds from setting, and the weeds lose interest in your ground because your ground stops feeding them." That's the thing. The bottle can never sell you because it isn't a product and it isn't a battle. It's a relationship with your own piece of earth. The fast solution keeps you a stranger to your garden, charging out once a month to do violence and retreating back inside. The old way makes you a neighbor to it, and a neighbor who walks his ground every week, cup in hand, catching the young ones before they flower, ends up with the quietest, cleanest beds on the road for almost no money at all. I think about how much was taken from people just by making them believe it had to be hard and it had to be bought, that a clean garden was something you purchased rather than something you tended. My grandmother kept a kitchen garden that fed a family of 11, and she never once bought a thing in a bottle to do it. She had vinegar, she had cardboard and old feed sacks. She had her 2 hands and a slow evening walk. And her ground was the envy of the county. That knowledge didn't disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it couldn't be sold. Those are 2 very different things, and the world counts on you confusing them. So when you walk out this weekend with your gallon jug, I want you to feel what you're really holding. It isn't just weed killer. It's a small act of refusing the story they sold you. It's the cupboard winning out over the shelf. It's the old, patient, plain way, quietly beating the loud, expensive, hurried way on your own ground where it counts. And every time a neighbor leans over the fence and asks how your beds got so clean, you'll get to do the kindest thing one person can do for another. You'll get to tell them the truth for free, the way it was told to you. You'll get to hand it down. That's how knowledge like this survived all those years the world tried to bury it. Not through stores, not through advertising, through one plain person telling the next, this is how we've always done it, and it still works, and it always will. So tell me your state, tell me your worst weed, and come walk with us while we dig the rest of it back up, one buried, simple, dollar-cheap truth at a time. The vinegar's in your kitchen. The day is coming hot and dry, and your ground is waiting for you to tend it the way it was always meant to be tended. Plain, patient, and you watched all the way through, so let me tell you what's next. Inside the Amish field circle, I pick up right where I just left off. You can ask me your own question, and I answer you myself, not some machine. And you won't be alone, folks, just like you are already with me. Point your phone's camera at the code on your screen, and you can cancel anytime, no risk at all. If this little trick helped you, do stay with me. Subscribe and look around the channel because I have many more simple, old-fashioned garden secrets waiting right here to make your work easier.